Today we're going to continue the journey of the Lumix G9 Mark II as it relates to everything overheating. So I've already made some videos about this, the fact that this camera can overheat in certain video modes, why that was a little surprising to me and caught me off guard. And now I want to dive into some of the tests that I was able to do today. I was filming outside all day with the GH6. That was the camera I chose today, and we'll get into why I chose the GH6 for that. But I was filming outside all day. As you can probably tell, I got some color. And in the background, while I was shooting, I was also testing the G9 Mark II, seeing what it could do while it was sitting in the sun. And we're going to go through all those conditions right now. I have some good news, and I've got some bad news, and I've got some realistic news as we dive into this. So let's just get right to it, shall we? If you look here, I got my temperature and UV index for the time. This is around 7:30 this morning. So early, the sun's up, but it's not super hot yet. This is all in Fahrenheit. And you can see I rigged the G9 Mark II as I would with any video camera. So I've got a battery on the bottom for extra power supply over USB-C PD. The PD is important. Power delivery is a special USB standard. If you don't know about it, look it up. It's got HDMI out to an Atomos Shinobi, and you can see I've got some general cables, but that's really all it is. It's the G9 Mark II with an HDMI monitor and an extra battery power supply, and that's how I would normally rig any video camera, a GH6 or anything. So I want to just set that out there. I didn't record anything. I just left it in the sun to see what would happen. Would it overheat just sitting there in standby mode? And lo and behold, it did. So in this configuration, with the HDMI and everything plugged in, if it's just sitting there, it will get too hot in direct sunlight. And that's kind of the biggest key. It doesn't matter that it's 68 degrees ambient temperature. It's the fact that I'm sitting it in the sun. Now you might be asking yourself, well, why would you ever do that? Why would you be in direct sunlight? Go in the shade, film inside, go somewhere else. And that can be a good choice if that's the project you're working on, but what we were filming was pool maintenance, backyard grilling and barbecuing and changing propane tanks and just general outdoor lifestyle type videos. And so I'm going to need to be in the sun. Now I am in Arizona. The sun is quite intense here and it's getting closer to the summer, and this is becoming more and more of a problem in certain conditions, but there are some remedies. There's some saving graces that we'll get into because I think there's a nice balance. We're trying to keep cool. Just everyone, just stay cool. I got the blue light. I got the blue shirt. We're going to stay calm and cool and collected throughout this whole thing. So I brought the camera inside, and you can see in the smaller picture, I brought the camera inside to kind of cool off, reset, and it made me think of the A7 Mark IV, which I have right next to it, and you can see that here. A lot of people have mentioned the Sony cameras overheat and, take that into consideration, and believe me, I have. The A7 Mark IV, for context, will overheat in a room, not even recording, just sitting there. I've had that happen. If there's not enough air circulation in the room, if the fan's not on, it could be, let's say, 80 degrees inside, and that camera will overheat even if you're not recording. So I totally understand that the Sony cameras are often far more guilty of this problem, and I don't really hold it against the G9 Mark II for a couple reasons that we'll get into in a little bit later. So what do I do at this point? If the camera cools off, I strip it down. We're going to take the monitor away. We're going to put it back outside, and we're just going to let it sit there like you were doing photo mode, which is what this camera has been marketed as. The G9 Mark II is a photography camera. That's what everyone will say. That's what Lumix will say. That's what Panasonic will say. This is a photography camera, and it just so happens that a lot of the reviewers were talking about the amazing video features, and so I think maybe me personally and maybe a few other people online got the wires crossed in our minds that this is the GH6 with phase detect, but that's not true. That's not what this camera is, and that's why I'm making these videos so you can actually understand what these limitations of the G9 Mark II are, because not many people were even talking about this stuff. They're just saying, it might overheat, but I want you to understand the real limitations of this camera if you want to choose to use it for video. If you want to use the G9 Mark II for photo, go ahead, because I couldn't get it to overheat just sitting it in the sun like this in photo mode. So just sitting there like this, I could take pictures. And what happened was I thought, okay, well, let me switch to video mode and see what happens. And sure enough, I switch it to video mode and I get the alert saying, hey, the blow functions are temporarily disabled due to the rise of the camera's temperature. Please wait for the camera to cool down. And you see that it's listed there. And I actually really like that they built this into this little disclaimer. it kind of catches you off guard at first. You think, oh, it overheated. And if you take the time to read and process it, it says you can't video record, you can't HDMI, you can't charging by you, all the things that I'm trying to do, it says you can't do, and you can't autofocus point scope. Okay, so we can't video record, we can't do HDMI, we can't charge by USB. Well, unfortunately, that's all the things that matter probably the most to me. So I'm glad that it's here spelled out in the menu. It says kind of, hey, dummy, not, this isn't for you. This is not the camera for you. And that's why I'm telling you about it, because I don't feel like that was really communicated to a lot of us, because people didn't know. They didn't really have this testing. They didn't push it to this limit, I guess. And so what did I do? I switched it back to photo mode, and sure enough, you can take pictures. So even if the camera overheats on you and you can't do video, you can't do HDMI, you can't charge by USB, if you switch it to photo mode, it will still let you take photos. So even if the camera gets hot, you can still do photos. And that's what I did. I switched it back to photo mode, and sure enough, the camera works great. So even if you're in a pinch, if you're finding yourself a problem, oh, it overheated, I can't do video, the camera is not completely broken. It's not completely bricked. It can still shoot photos if you need it to. So, funny enough, in the same day I'm doing all this testing, this Ulanzi fan shows up. I had a couple people in the comments say you should get this fan. It attaches right to the back of the camera, and it actually attaches quite nice. The design is pretty smart and clever. There's no sticker, there's no suction cups or anything. It's just a pinching, basically a tension mechanism that just slots in and nests in the exact same spot where the LCD flips in. So it's not a permanent thing that you have to glue or fix to the camera. It just pops in and pops out, and you can use it as you want. There's a battery built into it, so it can just charge it, run itself. It has USB-C though if you want to keep it continuously powered. So this showed up today. I said, great, perfect time for the testing. You'll notice I had to move the camera throughout my backyard to chase the sunlight throughout the day so I could continue and try and keep, relatively consistent testing. I should apologize for the quality of these pictures. They're just me snapping on my iPhone. They're not meant to be good looking photos. They're just for reference. But anyway, I get the Ulanzi fan, I put it on the back, and I say, okay, let's set it in the sun, and let's, see, okay, what if the camera's just sitting there now? Will it give me the overheating message in video mode? And sure enough, it doesn't. And that kind of surprised me. The Ulanzi fan actually does a job keeping the camera cool enough just sitting there in video mode that you won't get the error message. So I wouldn't recommend leaving your camera in direct sunlight like this, but I'm kind of pushing it to the limit to see, okay, what's possible? What can we do? And this Ulanzi fan actually does make a difference. From my previous testing, where I just left the camera in video mode in the sun and says, oh, can't do video, didn't have that problem with the fan. So I thought, what if I start recording? Can I film a clip? So I shot. Now I'm shooting in the highest of the high modes, the 5.8K open gate mode. So this is like essentially 6K open gate. I'm shooting on the G9 Mark II. It can do it. And you'll see at about 4 minutes and 54 seconds, I get the thermal warning. So I'm able to record an open gate clip after it had been sitting there for a while with this fan on. And ultimately, it did give me the overheating message. And I think that clip ended up being, exactly like 5 minutes. Now, that's not precise. It's not exact. I'm sure it'll change. It'll fluctuate depending on the conditions and how hot it was and all that stuff. What's nice, though, you can see on this fan, it's kind of hard to tell, but there's a little tiny LCD display on the Ulanzi fan that will give you the temperature reading that it's taking from the camera, so it can tell you what temperature the camera is. And it's in Celsius. I read through the menu. It didn't seem like there was a way to switch it to Fahrenheit, but no problem. We can just do a little math in our heads, and it'll give you a Celsius display for what the camera is. So it did overheat in the 6K open gate mode. So of course, every time it overheats, I have to like cool it down and then move it to a new spot where there's sunlight. And so this is later in the day. This is a whole process all day long. I'm filming as well as we're doing all this stuff. And I set up in a different corner and I say, well, what if I just switch it to 4K, 422, 10-bit, 24 frames? That's a very common standard mode. I am recording that often as well. As much as I use OpenGate, I also record 16:9, and when I am, I'm just doing 4K, 422, 10-bit. Very common, very approachable. With that Ulanzi fan, I was able to record for 20 minutes, and I was actually able to record And you can see there's the temperature display, 38 degrees Celsius. It was keeping it under 40. 40 Celsius seems to be the breaking point where it says this is just too hot. And I was actually able to record a clip that was 36 minutes, basically till the battery died. It didn't overheat. The battery just died. So like I couldn't record anymore. And I was trying to keep the setup low profile because I didn't want the HDMI, I didn't want the USB charging. All the things that it said are limited when it overheats. I was like, okay, well, I don't want to add that and cause problems in the testing. So with that Ulanzi fan in 4K, 422 10-bit, in a regular standard mode, 24 frames, nothing crazy, just a normal way we all like to film, I was able to record pretty continuous in direct sunlight. Now, this was later in the day. The sun was probably a little bit less intense than peak, right in the middle of the day or even in the early morning. It's hard to say. It's really hard to be precise. So I'm going to do some more testing, but I wanted to give you a little bit of peace of mind that Ulanzi fan actually does its job. It does work, surprisingly. I know some people have had success with it with the Sony cameras. I hadn't ever had the need for this before. I still don't know that I have the need for it, but I wanted to test it out. I think you can find those fans on Amazon for around $40. So all things considered, if it's something you're really worried about, you can get them. And basically, I think at this point, I would say the G9 Mark II, I still wouldn't try and shoot in direct sunlight. I'd try and keep it shaded. I'd be very cautious about what I was doing. If you live in a place where you have clouds often and it's overcast, it's a non-issue. If you're filming outdoors and you have a sunshade or something to kind of protect and help regulate that temperature and from the direct sun hitting the camera, you're totally fine. It's only in this unique circumstance that I find myself in often, that I'm filming outside. It's in Arizona. We don't have cloud cover all that often. It's usually bare sun all the time. And I have to film outdoors from time to time when you're filming things like pools and grills and those sorts of things, that I need a camera that can shoot open gate and not overheat. Now, the G9 Mark II is actually pushing things in the same way that the GH6 was pushing things by giving you this kind of super oversample, like this massive open gate format. The thing about the GH5 that is actually kind of valuable and still valuable to this day is that open gate on the GH5 is 4K. So you're not forcing the extra resolution. You're not, taking up that extra processing power and pushing the camera to its ultimate maximum limit, where some of these newer cameras are giving us these great modes, but I feel like they're also stressing the hardware more. And because the G9 Mark II was built with photography in mind, it doesn't have the fan built in, it wanted to be more weather sealed, more splash resistant. I get it. There's people who appreciate that it doesn't have a fan. And I understand that the GH6 is that's the solution. Like, that's got the fan. But I hope you can also appreciate that the GH6 doesn't have phase detect, and the G9 Mark II does have phase detect. And so when we have these different competing interests, the value proposition over here with this camera, but then the value proposition over here with this camera, I feel like it's why we're constantly critical, or maybe I myself am more critical and more complaining and pointing these things out as like a negative point. Not that I think the camera's bad. I don't think the G9 Mark II is terrible. I don't think Panasonic lied. I don't think anything was, mishandled or misrepresented. But what I do think is that we often want all these amazing features, and it's very hard to find the device that has them all in it. And the GH6, for a lot of reasons, still is this incredible camera that a lot of people kind of write off as like, oh, the GH6 wasn't a big enough upgrade. I've heard people at least make that commentary of like, you don't need the GH6, you can skip it. But it's actually pretty incredible everything the GH6 can do and how well built and designed that camera is, considering I used it all day filming in these exact same conditions. And not once did it overheat, not once did it give me any errors. The GH6 is rock solid. And for video and professional video, I highly, highly recommend the GH6. I cannot recommend the G9 Mark II to the same degree because the degrees, there's a pun there with the degrees. For photo, the G9 Mark II works great. If you're doing casual video, indoor vlogging, not taking advantage of the full open gate possibilities that are on the G9 Mark II, then you're probably fine. You're probably safe. There's a lot of people using the G9 Mark II for video. I think Petapixel, all their videos, they're shooting on the G9 Mark II. I think they're in Canada. I'm not exactly sure exactly where they're shooting all those, but it's probably someplace that's a little bit, a little bit nicer climate than here where I'm at, constantly battling the sun. And it is a unique set of circumstances. It is a personal preference. I am the type of person that wants to shoot video and photo in a hybrid mirrorless device. I want the professional tool, but I still want all the great functionality and flexibility of something that also works for content creation and YouTubers and influencers. I love premium professional products, but I also love accessibility and ease of use. I don't like the giant cinema cameras that have all the buttons. And living in Arizona, you learn real quick when products are designed for your area. This is very common with vehicles and other products where it clearly was designed or built with paint or upholstery or certain plastics that just cannot withstand the intense sun that we get here. And I'm sure there's other parts of the world that experience similar phenomenon and other parts of the world where it's a non-issue. As a corporation, I'm sure it's really hard to design cameras that, meet all these requirements and check all these boxes and make the photographers happy and make the videographers happy. It's almost impossible. But when I look at it, what I want is the professional tool that's reliable, it's consistent, it's not going to give out on me. It's going to give up when I give up, right? If I'm getting too hot and I overheat, then it's fair game that the camera, okay, fine. But if I'm there to work and I'm willing to push through it, I want my device to push through it too. But I also want it to have all the bells and whistles. So when I see things like phase detect, and we see things like how they've implemented dynamic range boost, this is great. This is what we want. And it's sad that it's not in the GH6. But granted, that camera's older now, so it's always playing catch up. And I was hoping the G9 Mark II would live up and meet those demands. Maybe in certain situations, the 4K 120, I get it, that's a very taxing mode. And it seems to me that the open gate is also a taxing mode in these. Again, I can't say, it's not like I'm not filming in a volcano. I'm outside in the sun. But that is somewhat uncommon. And so I can get that. And I think there's a nice balance. Again, trying to keep it cool. Let's keep it blue. Let's keep it cool. I don't hate the camera, but I want you to know that these are the limitations that I found because no one told me that these were limitations. And just had I known, I could have either made the choice about buying the camera with that in mind and known not to push it to the limits, or I could have just said, hey, I'm fine with the GH6. I don't need autofocus, phase detect autofocus just yet. I'll hold off on that because I really appreciate the thermal management. Everything up into this point has been kind of somewhere in between, from the reviews and the YouTubers saying, maybe, it could be, we haven't seen it. So I want you to know I've seen it. I try to do my best to test. This is not comprehensive. This is not everything, but it's at least up to date with my knowledge that I have, knowing that if I need to use the G9 Mark II in relatively tougher conditions, let's not max it out with open gate. Let's stick to 4K, 422 10-bit. Let's run the fan on there if needed. Let's maybe not push it with the HDMI, and maybe not. I don't know if I can do without the battery. I really like the all-day battery solution, so I'm going to still try and push that a little bit, but maybe not stress it with the HDMI and try and find, a balance for when I need to. If I need phase detect for whatever reason, that might be you if you're running on a gimbal. I'm thinking of all the scenarios where you might be outdoors in direct sunlight. A wedding comes to mind, a very popular venue that happens to be outside in the sun. I'd be careful with something like the G9 Mark II. If you're going to use it for video, I'd be very careful in that environment. I would go for something like a GH6 that in the 2 or 3 years that I've been using it, in these they're not crazy, in these harsh conditions, has not once ever given me any problem whatsoever. It is an incredible, incredible camera. And I'm very happy to keep using the GH6. In fact, all the things I missed about it, as far as, the flip up screen, time code, the CF Express cards, there's a lot of value and a lot to love on the GH6 aside from the fan. But it's funny, I didn't realize it was going to be such a big thing, but it actually is for me. But again, I'm in Arizona. I have more unique shooting situations. So don't take anything I'm saying as what's good or bad or what you should do or what you shouldn't do. This is all from my perspective, and I'm just sharing it so you can make your own decision. That's all I ever want, because I want people to do the same thing for me. When I'm watching a review on a camera, I want them to push it to its limit. And I think this is a good, helpful reminder for me too when I'm testing anything. Push things to their limit, just so you can know the breaking point and communicate that clearly, so that people understand and they can make a decision that actually represents what they want, and that they're making a decision in confidence that, yep, that's what I want. I'm signing up for this, and there's no surprises, there's no gotchas, there's no rug pulls. You're not catching anyone off guard, because that's the worst feeling, to think, oh, this is the GH6 with phase detect, and then to feel, oh, wait, no, actually, it's not. And no one ever really, put those pieces together in quite that way, in a very literal, actual, practical, tactical way. Here is the limitation. This is what I did. I want more of that. I want that level of communication so we can all just understand and choose the right tool for the job. That's what it always comes back to. That's what everyone says. It's a cliche, but the only way to choose to know the right tool is to know those limitations. What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? What is it good at? The G9 Mark II is good at phase detect autofocus. It's good at the dynamic range boost. It's good with stabilization. It's good with everything about it. Taking photos. The G9 Mark II is great. If you want to vlog, good camera. If you have an indoor studio, great camera. If you don't want to shoot open gate, great camera. But if you have any of the needs that I have, then you might think twice and say, okay, do I want to buy the external fan, try and solve it that way, but still maybe could be a problem in certain scenarios? I don't know. I don't even know what I think or feel yet, because I need to sit with it. I need to digest it. I need to test more and try more and see and push it to its limit again, and really get to know this camera to actually give my proper review, which I have not done up until this point. I've only just talked about it. First impressions, what I think, how I feel about it, what the experience has been like. It's done a great job until I started hitting those edges of what it was actually capable of, and then I had to pull back a little bit, and now it's just about finding that new balance. I'm sure there are times where I will use the GH6 because I know I'm going to be outside, it's going to be hot, it's going to be sunny, and it's going to be a problem with temperature, so I'm going to go to the GH6. But I'm sure there's plenty other times where I'll say the temperature is not going to be an issue at all. What's going to be the biggest issue is focusing, and I need phase detect. And so then I'll pick the G9 Mark II. And the beauty is that I get both sets of video features, but now that I know and I have the wisdom and experience to make those choices, I can actually make the right choice instead of just hoping and trusting that it can do everything for me, when at the end of the day, it can't, but that's also intentional by design. It's built this way for a reason. So I can appreciate that, and just know that I'll be continuing to test and push and experiment and see what other unique things I find out. And that's what I love about doing this, about not only just working, but understanding the equipment that I'm using. It's a very satisfying and fulfilling process, I think, because when you understand the tools, you can actually use them to their fullest and get more out of them than you would ever otherwise if you just pulled it off the shelf and you used it in the default settings and you said, yep, that's good enough. I take advantage of every setting in every menu on every page and try and get the most out of these things. I think that's just the creative process. And I think we end up unlocking, I don't know, some of the rigs that I've built where it's like the 2 cameras and all the cool stuff you can do just as one person. All those videos I find very fulfilling because they unlock new skills for myself, and I'm happy to share those things with you too.